that Kenya lost the quest to take the chairmanship of the African Union. Mr. Speaker, we all know, Mr. Speaker, that Africa belongs to all the 6 or so regions, Mr. Speaker. And as a person who has lived, gone to school, represents a county in East Africa, it could only have been fair that a candidate from East Africa takes over as the next chair of the AU. Mr. Speaker, AU belongs to all the 55 nations of Africa. Therefore, we want to feel a sense of belonging, Mr. Speaker. It's like a father who has many children. All these children need to have a sense of belonging. They need to feel that they are part of a family. So that was a very painful loss, not only for Kenya, but for the regional bloc called East Africa. And Mr. Speaker, if I was a president, this is the time I would have asked my brothers in the East African bloc to walk the talk. Mr. Speaker, I was in State House when President Yoweri Museveni rose and assured us Kenyans that he will be in Addis Ababa to second Raila Amolo Odinga's candidature. But the reports that we received from Addis indicate that Yoweri Museveni did not take time personally to travel to Addis Ababa to not only vote for us, but to also help us in campaigning. Because, Mr. Speaker, it's not easy to convince another president to vote for you. You need to have as many presidents as possible to support your candidature. So I hope that our presidents from the East African bloc will consider whether we will change the idea of leadership within the AU so that it becomes rotational. How come, Mr. Speaker, that in the 23 years that AU has been in existence, the Francophone countries have taken the position of chair for 19 years, and Anglophone only 4 years, Mr. Speaker. And yet, Kenya and other Anglophone countries make their contribution to AU. So, at times, Mr. Speaker, just like the way we do it in IALA, Mr. Speaker, you're privileged to be a lawyer. You know it, that the presidency of the East African Law Society is rotational. If this year the chairmanship goes to Kenya, next year the chairmanship goes to Tanzania, the other year it will go to Uganda. That way, you don't feel the pain of contributing to a body that will never allow you to take a leadership position. We cannot have an association or a union that is supposed to bring all countries together, but others have ganged up to ensure that other regions can never ascend to the chairmanship. Mr. Speaker, because the salary that pays that chair is also my taxes. By being taxed and by my country making a contribution, then I'm also having an expectation that one day, one time, I will proudly stand up and say, a fellow countryman or woman is chairing AU. So, in terms of going forward, I hope when there is a summit of the African Union, our president, President William Ruto, will put this issue on the table so that we can have, let us have ECOWAS in West Africa chairing. Next time, let it go to SADC, the way the other time we had South Africa. Then it can go to the COMESA region. Then it comes to East Africa. Senator Methu, we want fairness. The second point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is that it's not Raila Odinga who lost this election. The person who lost this election is our president and his foreign policy, Mr. Speaker. Because the way we handled this matter, Mr. Speaker, it left us with very little option of winning, Mr. Speaker. Because when you are doing a campaign like this, you must be conscious of the geopolitics, what your actions will mean to the person you want to vote for you, Mr. Speaker. Because even if the way it is said, and I know it's true, that President Tshisekedi is a personal friend of Raila Amolo Odinga, how does he feel, Mr. Speaker, when, again, and I'm using my words very carefully, when it is rumored that somebody has hosted the M23 leadership in Nairobi? Tshisekedi is a human being, Mr. Speaker. He will bolt. How will Kagame feel if the actions of a country that is, fronting a candidate seems to be hostile to the interests of Rwanda or South Africa or Tanzania, Mr. Speaker? I want to appeal to my president, President William Ruto, to talk less, do his foreign policy at times under the carpet, to avoid stepping on so many presidents' toes, Mr. Speaker, because they are also human beings. Everything that you do here impacts on your relations with another country, either positively or negatively, Mr. Speaker. And I know the PS Foreign Affairs, Singhuei, is a colleague, is a lawyer like me. And I feel so proud, I feel honored when I see a lawyer occupying that position of secretary in the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Mr. Speaker. But I also want to speak to my friend Singhuei to also be very cautious before speaking on a matter that may touch on our relations with other countries, Mr. Speaker. You remember, Mr. Speaker, SADC wrote a letter. P.S. Singhuei responded with a public criticism. That did not augur well with SADC countries, Mr. Speaker. So, really, the best thing they say is that you should learn from your failures. Let's learn from our failures. What happened to us as a country? We should sit down, evaluate, and take some key lessons from what happened, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on Saturday, and God Almighty is my witness, and my pastors in Nyamira are my witness, I told my pastors that instead of going to Addis Ababa, I'll be on my knees in Nyamira praying for Baba, Kenya's candidate, to win AU chairmanship in Addis. I was at Mesowa SDA in Ikonge with pastors, and we prayed for Raila Amolo Odinga, Mr. Speaker. Those who chose to accompany him to Addis Ababa, that was good. But how did we conduct ourselves, Mr. Speaker? If you have been a member of Law Society, and I know you have been, and you are a member in good standing, you know what happened when I was the president of Law Society of Kenya. We came up with a very good initiative to open the borders in East Africa so that lawyers in Tanzania can come and practice in Kenya, and lawyers in Kenya can go and practice in Uganda, and vice versa, Mr. Speaker. But when we were making that declaration in Speak Munyonyo Hotel in Uganda, the contingent from Kenya was the largest in that meeting. And they came there loaded, they had money, Mr. Speaker. So they painted Kampala. And you know, when the proposal was put on the table, the Ugandans were like, if this is the way these guys are behaving, even before we open the borders, if we open the borders, they'll take over Uganda. The Tanzanians said, if these guys are allowed to practice in Tanzania, they will take over. And Mr. Speaker, whereas we acted in good faith and opened the borders, we have Ugandans who are practicing in Kenya today, courtesy of that decision. But Uganda and Tanzania have never opened the borders for us because of the way we conducted ourselves. So, Mr. Speaker, at times, the cheering squad, the delegation that accompanied our candidate to Addis Ababa, Mr. Speaker, should have quietly given moral support to our candidate without loading it on the other countries, other presidents, because social media travels faster than even normal news, Mr. Speaker. So next time, let's learn. If it's not a football match, if it's a football match, you show you are mighty and you shout. But if it's something that is diplomatic, Mr. Speaker, let's be sensitive as to how we conduct ourselves. Because our conduct can irritate and annoy people who could have voted for us, Mr. Speaker. The third thing, Mr. Speaker, is our own domestic policy. Because we should speak about this matter very, very candidly, Mr. Speaker. At times, the way we run our domestic policy shapes the perception of our country, other countries about us, Mr. Speaker. So, what has been happening within our borders, we should also go back, look at the mirror, and ask ourselves, out there, how do other countries in Africa look at us as Kenya? How is our human rights record, Mr. Speaker? Have we created a country that has people who are happy? Because, Mr. Speaker, every year you get an index released on the happiest people in the world. Which country? I think currently it is, if I'm not wrong, it's Norway, followed by, I think, Australia and others. So we also need to know, have we created an happy population as a country? Mr. Speaker, when somebody was contributing on this floor here and mentioned Shah, Mr. Speaker, somebody from Nyamira sent me a note. He was given at a hospital called Christine Marian for a patient called Douglas Nyang'au, whom they were trying to admit this afternoon in that hospital. And Mr. Speaker, what he told me is that that hospital told them they don't accept patients to be admitted using that SHA card. That SHA should only be used in public hospitals. Yet, Mr. Speaker, we are priding ourselves as a country that has rolled out universal health coverage for everybody. You know? Another one, Mr. Speaker, sent me a message and said, Senator, remind the president that our people are dying because the SHA card is not being accepted in private hospitals, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a patient aged 94 years called Martha Nyamwange, I've just been told, was taken to a hospital called Medifort Hospital in Kisii. Mr. Speaker, that hospital, which had no sympathy on this senior citizen, 94-year-old, only accepted coverage on that SHA card on bed only. Then what happens to the medicine, to the surgeon, to the surgical expenses incurred in the hospital? And then we are telling people that SHA is working. It's not right. That's a lie, Mr. Speaker. So let us also look at our domestic issues. How are we treating our people, Mr. Speaker? This SHA thing is a problem, Mr. Speaker. In some counties, like Nyamira, now we are burying people on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We used to do burials only on Friday, Mr. Speaker. We represent our people, Mr. Speaker. We cannot sit here and shut our mouths from some of these issues, Mr. Speaker. And then finally, Mr. Speaker, the impact of Raila's loss in our country here. Mr. Speaker, we should guard our mouths at times. I listened to my good friend, Senator Cheragay. It's unfortunate that he's not here, making statements saying, oh, Now that Raila Amolo Odinga has lost the AU chairmanship, we want to offer him position of Prime Minister. Cherargei or Nelson Koech, Mr. Speaker, are not the right people to tell ODM what position to be given. They are not the right people, Mr. Speaker. If the president wants to give former Prime Minister the position of Prime Minister, he should do it in a manner that respects the Constitution first. I sat in NADCO, Mr. Speaker, and we made a recommendation and even gave powers to that office of Prime Minister. If His Excellency the President wants Raila Amolo Odinga to get that position, the right thing to do is to fully implement that NADCO report, not to send junior senators like Senator Cherargei to go and make announcements in the streets, Mr. Speaker. That is not the way you enhance unity in our country. If that position needs to be there, let it be entrenched in the Constitution. Let there be a discussion on who should occupy that seat through party organs, Mr. Speaker, but not through talk shows on TV, making pronouncements through the media. That is demeaning, Mr. Speaker. And it will send the wrong signals, Mr. Speaker, that there is no good faith from our president on this matter that was meant to take Raila to be the chair of AU. Finally, as I finish, Mr. Speaker, I join Ugandans, Mr. Speaker, in making an appeal to President Yoweri Museveni to ensure that Besigye is released from prison, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you read a book called Red Notice, you will think that the episodes captured in that book about the happenings in Russia under Putin are playing out in our neighboring country, Mr. Speaker. We want, within East Africa community, to respect human rights, Mr. Speaker, to show love, to show tolerance, Mr. Speaker, to our opponents, Mr. Speaker. So we urge our senior statesman in the region, President Yoweri Museveni, to have sympathy and a soft heart on that leader of opposition called Besigye. I hope the unfortunate thing will not happen, Mr. Speaker, where Besigye will die because he has not been able to get medical help under the watch of President Yoweri Museveni. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Senior Counsel Okongo Mogeni. And as you resume your seat, I wish from the chair to remind you that the NADCO report was presented before the JLAC, which I chair, and we've done a report which is already part of the reports which will be processed in the course of this session. That is something that is already in the order paper for the coming week, I believe. And secondly, you made reference to the Principal Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Singwei. You as truly remember